Okay, well, as promised, thank you for those of you who briefly showed your faces on the video and gave us a wave. We're very excited to see you. I know some people, so I get to see some more faces now. We're very excited to have you join us today. So first and foremost, thank you very much. We promise not to kill you with death by PowerPoint. We do have some slides to show you, but it will be very brief. So first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Debbie Wisch, and I am with Innovation Minds. We are the technology partner with Capstone Legal. And so we have joined together with them today, Capstone Legal, and especially a couple of the gentlemen I will introduce you to in just a moment will be doing the majority of the presentation based on their expertise in the area of diversity and inclusion. And, you know, we have, as I mentioned earlier, some of you heard, we have I'm grateful that you're spending a part of, I should say we have a global audience, so I should say a part of your morning, afternoon, and late evening with us today. We know for those of you in India, it's quite late, so much appreciated as well. Let's take a look at the first piece I wanted to do here is I wanted to talk a little bit about who's joining us today, but if I may here, give me just a moment to share my screen. And then that way we can follow along and you can see some faces as well. So as you know, you've joined a seminar that is about breaking diversity and inclusion barriers with tech and innovation. As I mentioned, hosted by Capstone Legal and Innovation Minds. So who I have joining me today is an excellent cast of characters for our seminar. And one of the things that this is, we find this topic is very intriguing when we talk about technology and innovation is what you're seeing here just below in the words. It's a question that we've posed. We've heard how a diverse workforce leads to a more innovative culture, but is the inverse relationship actually equally, if not more valuable? You know, sometimes we don't think about innovation and technology in the D&I arena. However, can innovation and technology in fact be used to drive a modern approach to furthering that agenda and truly make it collaborative and inclusive? And you'll learn a little bit more about what we mean in that regard. Let me tell you about who's joining us today. As I mentioned, I promised an excellent and a highly experienced group of well-regarded practitioners as well as panelists. So first of all, let me introduce two of the gentlemen who you will hear from quite frequently throughout the 2-hour session. In the first part of the session, we will have some informative content. We'll actually get to show you some hands-on opportunity if you feel brave to join us, but please don't hesitate to just simply sit back and watch if that's more in your comfort zone. But first of all, let me tell you, we have, and I'll have you wave, Amit Popat right there on your screen. Amit is with Capstone Legal. He is the Global Leadership Consultant. He is also Head of Equality and Access to Justice for the Bar Standards Board for England and Wales, and he is based in London. Now we have as well from Capstone Legal, Ashish Singh, and he is the managing partner of Capstone Legal, as well as door tenant at Harwood Law, based in the UK. Bala Subramaniam is the founder and CTO of Innovation Minds, and he's going to support part of the exercises when we do a little hands-on and we take you through kind of and that's where I will ask you to use the chat pane and whatnot as much as possible. And then you'll see the three individuals toward the right of your screen there. These are terrific panelists who we have lined up. Lisa, they are not on the line yet. They'll be joining us in the second half of the presentation. Lisa Haynes is a Senior Vice President and CFO and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer with the Mortgage Bankers Association. They are based in Washington, D.C. We have Kim Ann Hernandez. She is the head of IT Global Resource Strategy and Controls for the Vanguard. And we have Elizabeth Hackbarth, who is the Associate Director, Marketing, Human Rights Insights for the Clorox Company. And we'll tell you a little bit more about their background once they join for the panel in the second half. So let me pause for just a quick second. And now that we have more people on the phone, I have a couple of kind requests, if you wouldn't mind. A little bit of some instructions on how we can engage you and how you can use the platform and still be participative, because as you've noticed, we've so boldly placed everyone on mute due to the large number of attendees. So if you would, please, if you would like to keep your video on, you can. However, we find that sometimes we have a smoother flow when we have so many people if you turn the video off. And when it comes to asking questions, ask away. We have quite a few of us who are helping in the background. We're going to be monitoring the chat window. And so there will be times where where Amit may ask you questions, but there are other times where a question may arise. We won't always have the opportunity to pause at that moment for questions, but Amit, I'm sure you will have opportunities to pause, and we can check the chat pane periodically, as well as at the end, we will come back and see if we can answer questions. And I promise, any questions that go unanswered, we're able to tell where they came from, and we will actually even respond afterward. And Bala, please tell me if we've got the session being recorded, because if we are recording the session, then we can always share a recorded session if you'd like to share it with your colleagues, and or watch it again at some point in the future.
Yeah, we are recording.
Okay,
yep.
Excellent. Yep, so that's it for the housekeeping. Now, the gentlemen have asked me to give you a little background real quickly on who our organizations are. Since I'm speaking and not to go back and forth, I'll just briefly tell you quickly who Innovation Minds is. As I said, we're in a supporting role. We're not the main presenter. We are sort of supporting our partner, Capstone Legal. But because we're the technology partner, just a little bit about who we are, what we do. We are an organization that provides a total innovation management solution. So unlike other idea management platforms, our solution supports every step of your implementation, whether you need limited, full support, or consultants and master facilitators help achieve results. And what we do is we have idea management, we have assessment, we have crowdsourcing. We give companies and organizations like Capstone Legal, like organizations in the corporate world who are doing their diversity and inclusion, to truly engage across geographical boundaries, across nations, to co-create, to collaborate, and to have discussions and to talk about very specific challenges and ideas in a platform that makes it very easy to then get to the next steps. So, as I promised that would be brief, now I'll turn it over to Ashish Kumar Singh, who will tell you just a couple of moments on Capstone and why it is important to lead a session such as this.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Debbie, I can still see your screen. If you could kindly share. Thank you. So good evening to all the attendees joining from India. Good afternoon to UK attendees, and good morning to those joining from the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States. I can see many of my clients and friends in attendance from all over the world. We truly are a diverse audience today. So Capstone Legal is a law firm based in India with an office in the United Kingdom now. I'm the co-founder of the firm. I'm also door tenant at Harwood Law, which is a barrister's chambers based in England. Capstone's primary focus is dispute resolution with many Indian and multinational clients. We are also the first law firm based in India to have a specialized practice in diversity and inclusion. Amit Popat, who is one of the co-facilitators of this workshop, is our global leadership consultant. It is indeed a pleasure to organize and support this workshop because I feel that a diverse and inclusive organization is more efficient than others. This workshop is particularly useful for Indian entities. India is now the fifth largest economy in the world, and 1 in every 7 individuals in the world is Indian. There is a growing interaction between Indian companies with entities all over the world, which means that companies are required both by law and sometimes by contract to be more inclusive to prevent discrimination as an organization. I also believe that technology will play a crucial role in furthering the objectives of social justice. I was hearing a TED talk by Janet Stovall about the lessons we learn about how diversity at work can actually transform the things we do, think, and say outside the office. So how can we leverage technology to achieve this? Now, Innovation Minds has built a unique platform, and that's the reason why we have decided to partner with the Silicon Valley company to support our diversity and inclusion practice as a law firm. We have 3 global D&I thought leaders as our panelists today, which have been already introduced by Debbie. I sincerely feel that we can learn a lot from them today to understand the challenges that any organization faces during its journey to become more inclusive and diverse. And I'm hopeful that you get a chance to see Innovation Minds platform in action as well. Thank you so much again for your kind support, and over to you, Debbie and Amit.
Thank you so much, Ashish. Appreciate that. And actually now what I'd like to do is ask Amit to go ahead and begin with the barriers conversation. And let me know, Amit, are you ready for me to show the slide, or would you like to?
No, I'm totally
first?
ready for you to show the slide. Please do.
Okay. The coordination, it's uncanny, isn't it? Okay, let me go ahead and share that screen again, if I may.
While that's loading up, a big warm welcome from me as well to all of the participants, and really look forward to engaging with you in the future. This is one of the first workshops that we are doing on diversity and inclusion, and there is more to come. We know it's a really big agenda. We're really enjoying working with our partners at Innovation Minds, so thank you very much for hosting this with us. Indeed, we want to create a movement of followers for this agenda in different countries, and one of the key things that I think that we are looking for today is people using that chat box. So please make us feel welcome also by putting your thoughts, comments, ideas, and indeed questions to us. And that's really important because this is very much about participation. We cannot do diversity and inclusion work without participation. It is a key ingredient. Okay, so I have had the pleasure and the pain, I have to say, at sometimes of working on the diversity agenda around the world. I have a fond memory of my first opportunity of coming to India and doing some work with an educational organization there, which had thousands of young people who participate with them. And I had to do a session on diversity there. And also I gave a session on diversity and social justice and corporate diversity to the Aurobindo Foundation in Pondicherry. And it was wonderful to see how we can actually learn from each other. So the fact we have people from so many different countries joining, the idea is that we use and harness the diversity of participation to create good diversity practice, because that's a key ingredient. So one of the barriers around diversity is actually fear. People are actually very uncomfortable with engaging with difference. So we are human beings which like to be in our comfort zones as much as we can. In the HR world for organizations, there's this concept called recruiting in your own image. So you see a lot of organizations grappling with the diversity agenda because there's a sense of unconscious bias. What diversity aims to do is actually challenge ourselves. So one of the key ingredients for engaging with the diversity agenda is being able to come outside of your comfort zone. Education research has shown that people grow, develop, and succeed more if they operate outside of the comfort zone into the area of chaos. So that's research speaking. So whenever we are engaging with the diversity agenda, there is always going to be a sense of apprehension, and we should expect that because we are so used to living in our own cultural environments, okay? So diversity is about embracing our psychological challenges often of engaging with things which are quite different for us to engage with. So that also not only goes for individuals, but it also goes for organizations. So directly going into one of the key things that needs to happen is a good diagnosis audit of your diversity practice in an organization. The reason why I said that people fear is because that audit may not actually give you information that we like. Just imagine going to see a doctor and you've broken your leg and the doctor sends you out saying you've actually only broken your toe. That's not going to help you. You actually really want to get a full idea of the challenges and the problems that you are facing. So it's really important that the right diagnosis and audit is done of individuals in the organization and the organizational diversity policy and whether it's having an impact. But don't worry too much, because although I encourage many organizations to be dissatisfied during that process, we want people to be productive with the dissatisfaction. So it's a term that's used quite a lot in leadership training, which is productive dissatisfaction. And a lot of organizations avoid that because of the difficult messages, okay? So one of the key things that we want to be looking at is managing our fear when we feel uncomfortable, but that is part of the process. One of the next stages is authentic leadership. There are many organizations in different countries that I've worked with, and leaders have invited me to do leadership training on diversity. And it's really interesting where they seem to be all very keen about the diversity agenda, but are they actually role modeling diversity practice, and are they themselves taking risks? So it's really important to ensure that when organizations are engaging with the diversity agenda, that the leadership are very clear of their mission and their vision and what they want to achieve, but also that they are actually practicing good diversity within the organization, because that is what's going to get organizations engaging in the right way and their employees on board. So leadership is a really key issue. Leadership as a word is also an anagram of the word dealership. And I find that when I'm engaging with leaders, they try to do diversity deals with me. But what we are really looking for is for them to actually practice what they preach and ensure that they actually set the tone and culture for the organization. Another area, stage 3, is building high psychological contract through innovation. So organizations, when they're actually looking at doing their diagnosis audit, looking at the leadership agenda, they generally do it in isolation. But if you want people on board with the diversity agenda, you want to ensure that they are engaging as much as possible. So it's not a diversity strategy which has been created just by a few people who think it's the right thing to do. So innovation and platforms like this actually allow for that. So that means when you're thinking about your diagnosis and audit, you actually engage people from all around the organization, from all hierarchies. And actually you allow people from the lower hierarchies of an organization to really contribute in a very safe environment and allow them to be critical for taking the agenda forward. I've just seen a question here, which I will deal with as we go down. Okay, so psychological contract is really important because a lot of organizations have low psychological contract with the diversity agenda. They actually feel that it's just something which is about being politically correct, they haven't been involved with, and where diversity strategies have been successful is when that level of engagement has been created for them. And also there's a level of psychological safety where people actually feel that their comments are not going to be taken out of context, and people feel that they can say mostly anything they like about the organization and what they feel should happen. So that's what you want to try and create by way of culture. Where you've got quite hierarchical organizations and countries, that can be a challenge. So it's really important from the beginning that the leadership messaging around the diversity agenda is about saying that we want to hear everybody's voices. That nicely leads on to co-created and asset-based. So utilize the power of innovation. Asset-based means diversity as an agenda actually believes and knows that everybody has an asset and a gift that they can bring to the table, no matter what background they come from, no matter what gender, no matter what sexual orientation, regardless of their disability, ability, diverse ability. regardless of their social class or caste. Diversity assumes that everybody has a gift to give. So everybody is equal, because when we're speaking about diversity, we're also speaking about equality. So it works on the premise of co-creation and co-creating strategies to actually work on the assets that people can bring to the table. And that's a really important one, because often, because of the issues of discrimination, we recognize that we can have inherent biases towards different people from different backgrounds based on our own conditioning. So diversity means that you critically analyze yourself, recognize that we all have biases and we all have the potential to discriminate against other people. And at the same time says, okay, we can sit comfortably with that, step outside of ourselves and actually say, we're going to put our biases to the side and actually encourage lots of participation from different groups and know that people can bring the best of themselves to the table for the organization. That should be then scalable and adaptable and bring a real professional and business value to the organization. I know with the organizations that I have engaged with that many of them come to me for advice and support, particularly when they are engaging with contracts, when they want to win contracts from other organizations. Their diversity policies have to be on point. And I have seen many diversity strategies which have come in, and I know that they have lifted them off the internet, and it's been a really copy and paste from another organization. That's not what we're looking for here. What we are looking for is all of the steps previously. You know, we will know when an organization has got a robust diversity strategy, when they've actually looked at the business value for the organization, value for their staff, and also value for their consumers and clients. And remember, there are so many agendas. So this is stage 6 is interconnect diversity strategies. One of the other challenges that we have with diversity is that we are asking organizations and employees to engage with so many other aspects of the business, be that well-being, be that HR processes, be that organizational change and organizational development. So what you really want to do is not have a bolt-on diversity strategy. You really need to ensure that diversity is linked strongly to all of these other strategies. Research has shown that when diversity practice is not good and people feel discriminated, they're likely to leave the organization. That's going to have a whole business cost, and well-being levels go down, and less well-being people have, the less productive they're going to be for the organization. So anything that we do with diversity, it's always best to ensure that all of these other factors are connected to the agenda and the strategy. So I would say that these are the kind of 6 steps to ensure that diversity is successful in an organization. On the right on the diagram, I hope people can see it because I have a window pane to my right, is looking at PCS, and that's personal, cultural, and structural. So when we're actually engaging with diversity, it's not just on a personal level to do with actually trying to train people. We also assess the culture of an organization, and we also look at the systems and the structures. So it's really important that we take an anti-discriminatory approach to the diversity agenda, because in essence, that's what we are trying to achieve here, is a culture of inclusivity and minimal discrimination. And I put CM on the right there as well, which is change management. The agenda of diversity is very much about change. We really want to ensure that people can change effectively in an organization. It may mean the way the leadership think about how they operate in the organization has to change how they operate, and certainly in terms of people and behaviors. So it should not be seen completely as a straight line that we expect people to work with the diversity agenda and they're going to take on those principles and everything's going to be actually wonderful. It isn't. The change process actually means allowing people to make mistakes with the diversity agenda and allowing people to actually grow. So I would say that's a real reality check to driving diversity agenda successfully. I think there are some questions, Debbie, is that right?
Yes, there are. I would love if we could pause for a moment, Amit, and I will go ahead and speak on behalf of Iris as well as Barry. Iris has asked, what are the best practices regarding opening the discussion on productive dissatisfaction? Wow, how do you open this discussion without leaders or associates being very demoralized about potential negative outcomes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what I have done is actually not done that in an open forum. So actually engage with leaders in a way where it's almost negotiated prior to any meetings that I have with them or associates that I worked with, to say this might be a challenging process, but the essence of leadership is to deal with challenge anyway, because that's part of a leadership function, and recognize that that audit is actually going to feed the success of the organization. So so leaders don't lose face in the organization, have some conversations with them, either as a group or separately, to advise them on how to actually drive the agenda forward in the right way, and actually giving them case studies and showing them. So what I found is peer education is really valuable. So I've gone in with a leader from another organization to actually talk about that process and show that getting the diagnosis stage right in the first time when you're engaging with the diversity agenda is really important. So actually giving them evidence of, yes, it's difficult, but turning that into something which is productive and showing them how that has actually led to success.
Excellent. Okay, so why don't we take a look at one or two more comments, and then in the essence of time, we may have to hold some of those off, but I'd love to share a comment, and you can probably see it as well. But just so you're not trying to manage all of the windows and do the presentation at the same time, Amit and Ashish and Bala, what Barry Harwood has commented on is that one of the key challenges still faced by many organizations is unconscious bias. Unconscious biases, also known as implicit biases, are the underlying attitudes and stereotypes that people unconsciously attribute to one another, to another person or group of people, that affect how they understand and engage with the person or group.
Yes, so unconscious bias is a strand of diversity which is increasingly growing. And one of the programs that I've worked on is not only looking at unconscious bias, but then balancing that with conscious inclusion. And it links to also the previous question, because when we start to highlight people's unconscious biases, people can feel very demoralized and people can feel very challenged. But that, unfortunately, that is part of the process. And once people get over that stage, so my own example is in my life within the world of work that I have engaged with, I've had to look at my own unconscious biases. I've had to think about, okay, what has happened in my life to actually potentially unconsciously discriminate against women or people of a different sexual orientation or people from a different disability background. And I have to challenge myself. So that is one of the first kind of personal things that individuals have to do, is recognize that we all have biases, and that's okay, because some biases are inherent within our life and within our makeup, and they actually have a good benefit at certain aspects of our life. But when we bring them to the table at an organizational level, and when we start to stereotype and when we start to label people negatively, they can have a negative impact. So, Barry is absolutely right. And certainly that will be one of the other sessions that we are running around how to actually manage unconscious bias. That term is also being challenged by a lot of people. And the reason why is, if somebody says, for example, that they have been discriminated against, but the individual then says, well, I actually did that unconsciously, then who's responsible? So there is a movement out there which is actually saying, okay, is it really unconscious biases? And I can see where Barry has put, there are also implicit biases that we have as individuals. So, there's a word of warning around language and terminology. Thank you, Barry, for that.
Yes. Great. And so, and please do continue, our attendees and distinguished guests, please do continue to put your comments. I know there's a few more comments we haven't been able to get to. I have to allow Amit to get back to the presentation so that we can keep this agenda, which is action-packed, on point for you and on schedule. We know that's always hard to do, but we always try. So I will, of course, come back to these and look for any missed points, comments, or questions as we progress. So Amit, I'm going to go ahead and hand that back to you and continue, and let me know if there is, if you're finished with this slide, I'll go ahead and take it down.
No, I think I'm reasonably finished with this slide, but one of the main points I think as well is the use of innovation, and I know that I've mentioned it, but just to actually remind people that if you're working in an organization which has bases across the country, around the world, it's really important that we have accessible platforms for people to engage with where they feel safe, and technology actually allows for that to happen in a way where people feel that, you know, from their homes they can contribute to an agenda without actually feeling that they're in the spotlight of the pressure of engaging with the diversity agenda. So I think that there's a real opportunity here for us to develop some kind of best practice in this field.
Excellent. Okay, so Amit, was that the last of what you wanted to share, and are we ready to move on to?
I think we're ready to move on. I think we have done our 15 minutes, so it'll be great to move on to the next section.
Okay, excellent. And so this is now, if you're completed then, Amit, I'm going to go ahead and engage Bala Subramaniam from Innovation Minds. And maybe, Amit, if you want to, is there a couple of words that you wanted to say about the next step, or should we take it from there?
I would just say to people, please participate, take a risk. I've already mentioned on my slide that, you know, this can be a bit risky, but take the plunge, get onto the technology and contribute as much as you can. This is an example of how you can actually co-create learning together. So please participate and enjoy.
Great, excellent. So as Amit was talking about, you're probably wondering, what are you all talking about and what are you going to do next? So we actually are going to try and engage you in the conversation. It's always fun when we have, 60 some odd participants on the line. And again, we are still having everybody muted, but you'll have a way to physically participate, and don't feel bad if you're just going to kind of sit back and watch. That's okay too. But for those of you who feel so inclined, Bala Subramaniam will be guiding you through this exercise. And it is a discussion, and you will have the opportunity to put in some commentary, and then we'll talk about it. It will take it back and we'll synthesize what we've shared, and a couple of things. So Bala, if I may, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Awesome. So thank you, Amit and Debbie and Ashish. That was pretty insightful. We've been talking about diversity inclusion for long, right? But hearing from the leaders and also especially talking from your own experience, the best practices, really putting things into the perspective. Thank you. Why don't I go ahead and then share my screen here? And this is going to be a fun exercise.
As well, Bala is going to be sending a link in the chat window, and he will describe what to do, but just calling out to keep an eye on the chat window. If you don't have it open, there is going to be something for you to click on if you'd like to join us in the exercise.
Awesome. So what we are going to do here is we are going to be using the Innovation Minds platform exclusively built out for our partner Capstone Legal. And we are going to be using the platform for visually thinking about solving these barriers when it comes to this diversity inclusion. What can we do? What are all the solutions? What are all the barriers we are having? So you've been hearing from one side, right? Now, this is going to be giving you an opportunity to share what is on your mind. It's going to be pretty fun. So when I'm going to be logging into the platform here, so as Debbie was mentioning, this is an exclusive innovation platform, but we are not going to go through each and every one of the aspects. Now we will get into that fun exercise directly. So the exercise is going to be pretty straightforward. As you can see here, this is a two-part exercise. First, we are going to be taking some time to really have the conversation through this visual canvas. What are the barriers or challenges when it comes to this diversity and inclusion agenda? And as you can see here, left-hand side, we are going to be really focusing on understanding the challenges first. The more and more we are talking about the challenges and trying to share what are the constraints from each and every one of our perspective, because challenge that I may see from my organization could be different from challenge that maybe Amit could be seeing from his organization. The same way, the challenge that I see from, actually US context when it comes to D&I could be different from what Ashish is seeing it from the Indian kind of, ecosystem and all those things. So everybody is coming from a different background, right? So with all those things, it is going to be much more fun if most of you are going to be engaging and then trying to share your own perspective based on your own context and also the background and also what you're seeing in the workplace and also what you're seeing in your social place. So that is what we are going to talk about here. So without further ado, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to be inviting you through a link here. So some of you, or even actually most of you, may be able to go to the chat, click this link, and when you're trying to log into the platform, it's going to ask you to enter the user ID, your email ID and the first name, last name. Boom. So after that, you'll be getting to this canvas, and followed by that, we're going to be giving you 5 minutes for sharing what is on your mind when it comes to this diversity and inclusion conversation agenda. What kind of barriers you see? What kind of challenges that you see in your company, in your organization, or in your whatever the community that you are in or institution you are in? So the way how we would like to run this one is we have pre-populated some of these sticky notes. Why don't you go and grab some of the sticky notes that's open and then try to share your thought process. And also just an FYI to give you some idea what kind of barriers that we are seeing from our own experience. As you can see here, yeah, the leadership mindset, right? And that could be one of the barrier challenge. If it's not coming from top down, there's going to be an issue. And the same way as you move on, engagement, it could be another issue, right? We may just keep talking about diversity and inclusion, but if you're not providing a platform, if you're not providing a channel for everybody to come and share what is on their mind, it is a lost opportunity. So as we can move on, there are multiple things that we are seeing in our front, like shared language and as well as the understanding. And sometimes even the lack of expertise. You may have true intention to go and solve it, but you don't know how to do it. There are so many challenges, right?
Bala,
Yeah.
may I just interject for a moment, just in case people don't know? What you do is you double click. So we've already filled in some of the green sticky notes for you, just to give you ideas. You can double click in a blank one to go ahead and put in what you see as the current barrier. Or if you double click in the white space, you'll be creating a whole new sticky note over there, and that's okay as well.
Good. Thanks for that context, Debbie. So either you can use that sticky note that's already available, or if you can double click on the canvas, you may be able to go and create your own sticky note.
And Bala, one other thing, they may need to see how to move the canvas or make it bigger or smaller so they can see what's at the bottom.
And that's another good point. So very quickly, if you're not able to see the holistic canvas here, there is something called view. If you just look into the left-hand side menu, there is a select on the top, and after that, there is the hand symbol. If you just click on that hand symbol, you may be able to do the scroll up or scroll down, and you'll be able to see the zoomed in version or zoomed out version, or you may be able to move the canvas. So pretty much everything is available here. That's a good point, Debbie. So in case you're not able to see the holistic whiteboard, it is very easy for you to go and move around and then bring it to a position that's convenient for you. So quickly, are there any kind of technical issues? Anybody is trying to log in and having any issues? I think it's pretty good to see all these kind of activities here, right? A lot of action going on, collaboration going on.
Yes, there is a great, it's excellent. Thank you everyone so much for participating, and no need to use any of the drawing tools. Just go ahead and click on the sticky note.
And I do like the comment from someone like, how do we do this in a global context outside of US? That's a great question. Maybe we'll leave it to the experts. Amit, do you want to chime in?
Yes.
So
the
what we'll
question is,
do,
Yes.
Paula, to keep it as a fluid flow here, that sounds redundant, doesn't it? Is we will have you go ahead and have them enter the content, and then after that, we'll stop on the challenges and then move over to the solutions and have people click on the existing blue sticky notes. Or put something within the challenges section. And then Amit, if you can come in at that point.
Yeah.
And give your commentary on and your expertise on all of the great input we're seeing.
It is so good, isn't it, to see all of this participation right now. This is exactly what we want to see. And it kind of answers the question, how do we do it on a global level outside of the US? But as we can see here, that people are from all over the world contributing to a process which is allowing for global understanding and input.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So why don't we move on to the part 2 now? So we had enough time to really think about and talk about and also visually share what are the barriers, challenges you are seeing in your own context, right? So it is pretty encouraging and also fun to see all this kind of thought process coming right off the bat. So this is the power of the visual collaboration, right? So everybody is going to be comfortable expressing themselves, their point of view. That is very good to see. Now, if you just look into the right-hand side here, we will start thinking in a different direction. Okay, now that we have talked about the challenges and barriers, there is a kind of level set. Okay, these are all the things that we may have to solve. The same way, can we take next 2 or 3 minutes trying to think of the solution maybe for the challenges that you have highlighted here or somebody else is actually sharing here. So let's actually get our creativity juices flow and then see how do we solve some of these challenges. The way how you can contribute to this exercise and also the collaboration is that pick any one of these blue sticky note, my solution is, so I'm actually typing in here. So pick any one of these blue solution and trying to share how can we solve some of these things. For example, Amit talked about unconscious bias, right? Anybody is having any kind of eureka moment like, hey, I got an idea for solving this one. We can do it this way, or we can do that way. So we have to really use the collective brain power here. Bring it on. What do you got? How can we solve these things? So I'm going to be setting up a small timer here. We'll just go for another 2 minutes. So the timer is starting now. Again, to summarize, we have already talked about the barriers, challenges that's really impacting us not to move forward with the D&I. Now, it is a time for us to really come up with a solution on the spot. So let's not worry about, hey, my idea is not ready or it's not completely baked in. See, that is one of the things that we would like to really, really emphasize. Share what is on your mind, whether it's crazy or wacky, or it is really a good idea, or it's not so good idea. So let's not worry about any of those things. Nobody is here to judge your idea. It's just the content that we are going to look into that and the context. And it is a pretty safe forum for you to share your solution and then seek the feedback from others. Hey, this is my solution. Does it make sense to you? So somebody is actually brave enough to share that solution. Wow. Provide many examples and get people to recognize and rehearse. That's spot on. And then there is also another solution like enable one-on-one engagement across department on all levels. See, you know what? That's actually spot on solution, right? This is going to one of our philosophy in innovation minds as well. If you're trying to solve this one and the transformation or movement is happening in pockets, you will not be able to truly transform that diversity and inclusion front, right? Yes, it has to happen across all departments and top to bottom, not like just at the leadership level or at the employees level. That is a beautiful solution somebody is suggesting here. And any other ideas? I'm sure that we have got some Albert Einstein or all this kind of scientists here, right? So come on, bring it on.
Hey, Bala, and by the way, I've got a couple in the chat pane that I'm typing in on their behalf.
Oh, sure, yeah. So it is time up now. So as you can see here, this is the power of the platform that Innovation Minds and as well as Capstone is sharing with our clients. And then the first thing that we usually do, even before prescribing the solution, are actually talking about the challenges. We would like to bring in the collective wisdom of what is working, what is not working in your organization. Let's try to get to know you. So that is the whole idea here. So none of the solution provider or service provider will go there and say that we know what is your problem, so here is the solution. That is a pretty wrong way of starting it. So that is the reason why actually we are doing this exercise, is that what is on your mind from your own perspective? What do you think are the challenges? And if these are all the challenges, how do we solve those things? Let's have a kind of collective conversation here. That's the whole point of doing this one. So any other thought before moving on to the next segment here? So we talked about the challenges. It is pretty refreshing to see a lot of different perspective. I would say that diversified perspective came in from our wonderful audience.
Yes, and
And
Bala.
also a lot of folks are taking up the challenge and rising up to the challenge, saying that, hey, not only I can just talk about the problem, I can also come up with a solution. That is awesome experience.
Bala, give me just a moment to put one more in, and then I think we should move on. But before we actually move into the ideas, let's perhaps, do we have time to give Amit a moment to make any commentary on based on his expertise on what he sees here?
Awesome, yeah.
Okay.
Brilliant.
That could actually happen even as I'm putting in the final one I'm seeing from.
No, that's absolutely fine. You carry on and I'll just look at some of the contributions that people have made. So this is a real example, again, as I mentioned, of co-created learning. So really important. So some of the things that we have, a really interesting one I've seen, denial. We don't have any issue here. The amount of times I actually see that in an organization, and I can tell a quick story about that actually. I was doing some leadership training for an organization with their leaders. Their name will go unmentioned, of course. And what happened was the training was for 4 hours. The leader comes out and says, Amit, we really don't need this training. We don't have an issue here. We know about different diversity issues. I know your focus is going to be corporate disability practice, but we really are a company that knows what it's doing. And I said, well, the training is mandatory because that's what I've been employed to do. It's going to be for the 4 hours, so I'm not going to change the time. And him and his leadership group had found it a bit difficult to start with, and then we managed to kind of warm up. And however, I actually felt that they weren't fully on board. What was really interesting, a couple of months down, I had to do training in the same organization with another team. And I met the leader who found that the 4 hours was too much around looking at diversity and disability issues. And he said to me, he goes, Amit, I've had a change of heart. And I said, okay, what is your change of heart? He said, my son is a student of sport and has had a sporting injury, which has left my son in a wheelchair. So what happened was, linked to a previous conversation that we had, his psychological contract, because diversity then became an issue for him in his life, the sporting injury left his son in a wheelchair, and suddenly his commitment to diversity increased vastly. So one of the key issues that we want to look at is, although we deny that diversity is an issue, until it actually starts to have an impact on our life, okay? India, for example, many people from India on this call come from a collectivist environment. So we recognize that collectivism, that whole sense of community, somebody else's problem is my problem. So I come across this a lot in organizations as people think that they don't have a problem. And part of the job of the auditing is to actually identify where they may have a problem, but also not to see diversity as a problem. Actually let people know that the richness of thoughts and ideas that diversity actually brings is very positive to the organization's success and creativity, okay? And that's really important. So lack of knowledge of his story, so really important around creating stories in organizations and training people. The thing you want to avoid is having minimal compliance online training. What you want to have is training which is going to be really meaningful using blended learning methodology, which is going to have an impact on behavioral and organizational change. A lot of organizations, what they do is, in terms of training, is go for minimal training, which just gives people a bit of an idea about what the diversity agenda is about, what the policies are, but that has also proven not to have a big impact on organizations. So they invest in something like that, but the impact of that is not that great. There's many other things on this. Leadership, as I mentioned just now, is a real issue. There was an organization that I worked with where I did some leadership training. They all had their action plans ready. And I went to see them 6 months after, and I asked them how they were doing with their diversity action plans. And they all said to me, Amit, we've had so many difficult issues, timing, where we were under-resourced. There are all of these challenges that were going on within the organization. I said, okay, no problem. These are valid reasons for leaders. However, what I've got is funding from a research council to take a group of 20 leaders to Africa to do some work around diversity for 2 weeks. How many of you would like to join me on that? And all of the leaders put their hands up. Now, it so happened I didn't have funding for 20 leaders to take them to Africa, but suddenly they had found 2 weeks to contribute to the diversity agenda. So something we have to be very careful of is not being complacent with the diversity agenda and ensuring that you actually make time and space. And that's brilliant. I mean, we could spend on each of these areas a day's training very easily. So thank you very much for everything that you've contributed to. Let's have a look at the solution. So linked to core business objectives, really important. Diversity shouldn't be seen as a Bolton. I've already mentioned that. I'm looking at encourage minimum to build and reach out to majorities. So encourage minorities, yes. So there's always an issue around majority dynamics with the diversity agenda. So what we've been doing with another organization that I'm working with is reverse mentoring. So how do we actually get the minorities in an organization to mentor the majority around their diversity issues? That is a program which we are running and is proving to be very successful. Invest, really important to actually invest time and resources into the diversity agenda. Remember, having co-created strategy, feel the fear and do it anyway. Yes, it can be nerve-wracking. And at the same time, we want people to actually feel that fear and take that risk. So have I missed any other key points, Debbie? Is there something on here?
No, and I know we can't cover them all, but we will certainly bring them up in follow-ups and additional commentary. I think Bala has a couple of more things that he'd like to show in terms of so what happens after the whiteboard? Whiteboard is a brainstorming session, but ultimately what we're getting out of this is we're stimulating, we're firing off the synopses in our minds, we're co-creating and brainstorming with our colleagues, and then ultimately we are getting ideas that we want to actually start to socialize with our peers, colleagues, business associates, and maybe even our trade association and supply chain associates. So Bala, if you can take that back and share. Just briefly, Bala, I'm also going to let you know that our panelists have joined. So I'm just letting you know that for later, for when it's time to unmute them. But I know first, if you would like to go ahead and share the challenge, the ideas, and the feed, that would be great.
Awesome. So quick time check, Debbie. How long we got for talk
Yes.
about the continuum?
Well,
Maybe 10 minutes?
We have about 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
But if we go a little bit over, actually, you know, Amit has actually done, we flip-flopped here because it made good sense. Amit, you were going to be speaking about what you were seeing about expanding the dialogue and how it was important for creating strategies, and you were going to be talking about some of the points that you were seeing here. So maybe we've already covered that and we can give Bala that extra time. But I'll leave that up to you to tell me if I'm off in left field.
No, if I feel I need to just quickly top and tail, I will. Otherwise, over to Bala.
Excellent. Yes. So Bala, if we can maybe split the difference and give you about 7 minutes.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that works.
Okay.
And you can always actually alert me, okay, whenever you're ready to move on with the panelist. We are good to pause and then move on. Okay. So once again, thank you all for this wonderful collaboration. So this is the beauty of it, right? Within like 1 hour, we are knowing each other, and when we are starting the conversations, we are just keeping our fingers crossed. Slowly, we are easing ourselves. Oh, diversity. These are all the challenges I'm having. And the moment when we come to the whiteboard, maybe in an hour, don't you think we're all feeling comfortable, confident, and think like, okay, I can just share my thought process. I can share my point of view. It's a safe and also kind of easy platform and channel. So that is the beauty of the kind of solution that we are trying to encourage most of the clients to start following it. And along the way, we are also learning what works, what doesn't work. So with that, you did this wonderful exercise, right? Now there is $1 million question. Now what? What are we going to do after all these wonderful ideas that we got and the collaboration we did? Where do we take it from here? And that is where, when you just go to this challenge. So as you can see, each and every one of us in this group pretty much know what are the challenges we are going to be solving for our own organization. And also you heard some of the solutions, ideas from your peers in this group. So why don't we just talk about looking into some of the solutions and then execute the best one within your organization. So it is pretty easy for you to go back to the challenge, and then you can say that, you know what, I got an idea for solving this one. So in this case, you can just say that, I'll just take the example of Amit. Amit talked about that reverse mentoring, right? So the reverse mentoring, what we can say is there is a lack of one-on-one conversation between, could be minority team members versus majority team members, or actually different identities and all those things. So I would say that lack of one-on-one, their transparent conversations. So you may think like this could be one of the problems that you're trying to solve, right? So what is your idea for solving it? I'm borrowing your idea, Amit. Hopefully I'm not infringing your patent, okay?
Please do, don't worry. I'll send you a bill.
Hey, and Bala, also, just so you know, we have pre-filled most of these original pre-filled barriers and challenges.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry, into the ideas window. So you'll actually see them there as well.
Of course, yeah. So I'm just actually showing the continuum. Now that we have talked about the challenges, solutions, it's pretty easy with the power of this platform to continue the conversation, go and submit your ideas. Boom. Now that you captured the ideas, when you go to the ideas hub, not only you're able to do that kind of sound thinking or visual thinking in the whiteboard and share the challenges, we are just taking that one step further and trying to convert all the solutions that you're talking about as your own ideas. Each and every one of you may be able to go and submit your ideas. Suppose you're not ready to go and submit or publish your ideas, you may be able to go and save it as a draft. work on it and polish it, tweak it. And the moment you get the comfort that, yeah, I'm ready to open it for the whole world to see, this is my idea, this is my solution, boom, you can go and publish it. So not only you'll be able to see your ideas here, and as I was telling, this is the ideas hub, right? You may be able to see what are the other ideas or solutions suggested by your colleagues, your managers, or your leaders. So this is where the whole conversation is coming in, and you're going to be getting a different perspective, different solutions. For example, when you're going to go and look into this particular idea, who has submitted it? What is the context? So you'll be able to do all those things. So I don't want to show the entire platform demo here. This is primarily for showing you the continuum. We had the fun exercise. We were able to do the sound thinking on challenges and solutions using the whiteboard, and then carry on the conversation into the actual execution through this ideas hub. So that is a continuum I'm going to be showing it to you here. Okay, now that you have submitted the ideas, you may be able to go to this Facebook for innovation and trying to see, yeah, we did the exercise on the whiteboard, visual thinking. I have submitted the ideas. Is there any kind of traction? Anybody is agreeing with my idea, or anybody is having alternative thinking? It is pretty easy for you when you're going to be in a Starbucks. Just pull up your smartphone and then see who is interacting or engaging with my ideas. Or what are the other solutions that I should be aware of? So that is where actually we are bringing in the collective wisdom or collective mindset here. It's not just you have only one idea from your side, you have only one team. You can have an idea, but there could be a different ways of solving the same challenge through a different idea, right? So we are just trying to bring in all those kind of the mental kind of opening up everything, and then, hey, there is one option here, there is an alternative option here. Let's talk about it. What is going to be the best solution for solving this particular challenge? That's a whole power of the platform and as well as solution that Capstone is kind of championing with their clients. And then, okay, so you may ask, like, oh, we did the whiteboarding exercise, and a lot of my colleagues and myself were able to share the ideas. There is so much traction. Now what? So that is where we will just quickly show you, if you're the one championing this particular program, you'll be able to go to this management and then see everything in one place. We did an exercise. There are close to 50 ideas. Amit has submitted one, Devi has submitted one, Bala is having an idea. Among all those things, this one particular idea is socially popular. It is getting a lot of likes. It's getting a lot of comments, so much traction around it. Or sometimes you may see that even though socially this is popular, maybe the stakeholders, leadership team is not thinking this is very relevant at this time where we are here now. So you can just go by how many votes this particular idea is receiving, or in terms of the effort versus impact. For example, there could be one beautiful, wonderful idea, and that's going to be taking 2 years to implement. And the impact is going to be relatively less. Whereas on the other side, you got another idea which can be implemented within next month, and the impact is going to be huge. Obviously, you're going to be choosing the quick win, right? So that is the whole power of this view that you're seeing here. You may be able to go and view all the ideas submitted by your colleagues in terms of the votes, in terms of the impact score, and also in terms of the social popularity. Finally say that, you know what, I'm going to be funding this one. I'm going to be activating this one. So that is how we are kind of leveraging the innovation and platform to solve this diversity and inclusion. As you can see here, this is not just a keynote or somebody is going to come and give you the free advice and then move on. No. What Capstone talking about here is that they are just priming the process in terms of bringing everyone with the power of this platform to have the visual thinking in a safe and also some forum. The more and more you're opening it up, slowly they're providing the continuum of converting the small spark you have into a kind of small idea, and then that idea will become into the great concept, and then slowly they will execute your whole transformation path.
Yes. And I'm
That should be
sorry,
it, yeah.
Bala. If I had music, like at the Academy Awards, I would start playing it.
No, I'm done. Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
So we are running out of time, but what I'd like to do is pull it back. Actually, sorry, I didn't want you to quit there. I wanted to show one more thing. I wanted to pull it back into the D&I conversation. So what I was going to ask you to show actually is in the ideas. If you could pull that up quickly again, go into the ideas and out of the demonstration and actually go into the ideas. So what I'm going to talk about here real quickly before we move on, because our panelists have already joined, which is very exciting. But what you'll see there is you'll notice in the ideas that you'll see what you saw in some of the cards, the co-creation of the D&I strategy, including the D&I programs and budgeting cycles, making it okay to fail. So Bala, if you click on the third one to the right, the include D&I programs, bringing it back again into the dialogue. Actually, let's go back. I'm looking for one that has the commentary on it. Maybe it got moved. Let's see. Yeah, just jump into one or two and find the comments. And then if we can't find it, we'll go. But try one more time. And if we can't find it, we'll go. What I did there is I primed quite a few of those ideas and moved them up front so that you could see what happens when there's dialogue. Here we go. So now what's going on with the conversation? So you saw the whiteboard, as Bala said, and now the ideas that have graduated forward that you say, okay, you know what, eureka moment, I have an idea, and you start to put it in there. But now what happens is a social engagement. Oops, I can see. Bala, can you move that for just a moment? Thank you. So what we see now is a social engagement where Amit is making a comment about this. He completely agrees, but he has an alternative viewpoint. And now what you see happening below is an interactive dialogue that, again, is doing exactly what Amit pointed out about having that stimulated conversation. And from this, Bala showed you the Kanban board where you could move things around. But from this dialogue, that's where you determine, okay, we're actually going to focus on one of these and we're going to make viable change because this dialogue that has happened has now vetted out a reasonable effort that we want to work on and we want to add to our corporate strategy or to our nonprofit strategy. So sorry about that. I just wanted to add that.
No, that's
Now you could turn it down. I wanted to just bring it back to sort of that interaction and tie it together nicely with a bow on what Amit was talking about before. So great walkthrough, Bala. Thank you so much. So now we are in our second half of the program. And Amit, I'm going to go ahead and see if there's a couple of things that you want to talk about, because Amit is, with the background that he has that I described, I will briefly reintroduce, once you are ready, Amit, I will reintroduce our panelists because they didn't get to hear my great introduction of them before they joined. I gave the bios for the three of you before you came on. So go ahead, Amit, let me know if there's some dialogue you'd like to have first.
Well, just to actually say, one of the solutions for best diversity practice is getting the right experts involved and getting the leadership on board. And here we have some of the solutions that we are actually thinking about right now. So really looking forward to kind of getting into some dialogue and questions and some challenge around how we can make this agenda more impactful across the different organizations we're connected with. So Debbie, over you.
Yes. So we have, as I actually had put up your pictures, Elizabeth, Lisa, and Kim on before. So there was a slide that had all of the panelists' pictures, and I talked a little bit about your backgrounds. But let me just reintroduce the three of you, and I'll just talk again. I won't do the whole bio, but I'll mention that we have, and I'll have you wave so they know who is who. So we have Elizabeth Hackbarth, and she is Associate Director, Marketing Human Insights for the Clorox Company. And by the way, each, regardless of current title, each of our panelists have extensive background and responsibilities, experience and insight and leadership in the area of D&I. And I think it's Elizabeth who calls it IND. So it's all the same to us, Elizabeth. You go right ahead. We also have Lisa Haynes, if you could give a wave there. Lisa is a Senior Vice President and CFO and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the Mortgage Bankers Association. Well, she, I believe, is located in Florida. The organization she is part of is in Washington, D.C. And we have Kim Ann Hernandez. There's Kim Ann. And Kim Ann has had a variety of roles with Vanguard, and she is now head of IT Global Resource Strategy and Controls. And so Amit is actually going to be our key moderator, but just wanted to say, let's go ahead and hear each of you say hello to make sure that we can hear you.
Hello.
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 Yay, okay,
Yeah.
we can. Excellent. Okay, Amit, I'm going to hand it to you and have you do the panel.
Great.
And engage
Thank
as you
you.
fit.
Thank you so much, Debbie.
My
Great
pleasure.
to speak to you again. One of the things that we've spoken about in preparation for this is, although you have diversity as part of your portfolio, but what are the key influencing factors that actually drives an agenda forward for you? So how can you actually influence best practice in a way? Because I'm also a diversity practitioner and a leader in an organization, and it still means that I have to do quite a bit of influencing. So what have you done to influence best practice in your organization? And I think I'm going to start with Kim Ann first.
On the spot. So part of it is just my job responsibility, right? At Vanguard, not only do I head the Global Resource Strategy and Controls Group, but I am also the lead for DE&I for IT at the organization.
Sure.
And I also am the executive co-sponsor of our group called Open, which is our LGBTQ+ resource group. So first and foremost, I have it formally. And then secondly, I think part of the influencing is to live it every single day. Like you have to be a zealot advocate for diversity, and you have to like show it every single day in how you act and what you bring to the table, even things unrelated to what you would think of as diversity and inclusion on a daily basis.
Right. Thank you so much for saying that, because we are the advocates for change in ourselves. And often people think because we have roles in diversity and inclusion that we are speaking from a moral high ground. So one of the first things that I say to people when I'm leading a diversity program is, look, I know what sexism is about because I've been sexist to women in my life, and I've seen how that plays out in my life. I also didn't know much about LGBTQ+ issues, so I need to learn about that and I need to challenge myself. And when I say that, the amount of sighs that I see in a room saying, "Oh, this is going to be really real," and he's putting himself in not only as the solution but also the problem. And I think that's really important to actually show from a leadership level vulnerability around that. Where I feel it doesn't go well is where diversity practitioners as leaders actually say, we've got the answers to everything and we're going to tell you how to actually do it. And I think that's a very parent-child approach which doesn't hold water. So thank you so much for actually saying we are the first people that need to actually make that change. I'll go over to Elizabeth.
Yeah, so, you know, diversity inclusion is really hard. And I think influencing the D&I programs within each company is unique and in itself can be very diverse on which company you go to. Specifically, what I'm involved in is even trying to influence the culture of D&I, which gets even more ambiguous and elusive and crazy. And so really what I found and the best way that we were able to influence within Clorox was we networked with a lot of external Bay Area companies like LinkedIn, Pandora, Chevron, Kaiser Permanente, which is the biggest healthcare system in California. And we found their best practices and we brought those into Clorox. So we found from LinkedIn the importance of belonging, from Pandora the importance of authenticity and transparency and how to bring that to life. And so we didn't want to do it alone. We knew that reinventing the wheel just doesn't make sense. And so how could we partner and bring almost like a small coalition together to figure out best practices especially in the Bay Area where you would assume that there's diversity, but we know that we've had all these conversations around tech and not being as diverse as they need to be. And so it was really important for us to find external best practices and pick the ones that are going to be the most valuable to move the Clorox culture forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things which we didn't speak about prior to you actually saying it right now, so thank you very much for that, is the coalition. Collective action. If we look at any diversity agenda, whether we look at it in terms of legislative changes or whether we look at it in organizations, it's people who have come together to challenge the status quo that has actually shifted cultures, which is very difficult. And I'm so glad you also said that it is a difficult agenda. Sometimes I think people shy away from that because we're dealing with so many different identities, and different identities can actually conflict with each other. And we have to be open about that. I remember doing some work in an organization, and there was a group of people from different faiths saying to me, I mean, there are some faith issues in the organization. We need to get an inclusive culture. And I go, sure, let's do that. But then people from different faith backgrounds were potentially being discriminatory to people from LGBT backgrounds. And that's where it gets really messy. And I think that's where the fun of diversity and the difficulties and the challenges really start to happen. And that's the bit I really enjoy. So Elizabeth, thank you for those really two key points there. Lisa, over to you.
Sure. So my role is a little bit different because we're trying to influence an industry. So the Mortgage Bankers Association is a
I can't hear you that well, Lisa. I'm not sure about other people, but the sound quality was very different. Is that right, Debbie?
Sorry, I'm muted. No, I can hear Lisa. She's faint,
okay,
but I
that's
can
fine.
hear
It's probably
her.
just from my
Yes.
system. Sorry, Lisa. Please.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
That's all right. I'll try to speak up a little bit so people can hear me in case it's not heard. So the Mortgage Bankers Association is it's a trade association, and our members are mortgage companies. We're in the real estate finance industry, and so we have a little over 2,000 members, and they vary from mortgage companies to big bank to those who service the mortgage industry. And so we are doing two things in my role and in my area. We are both influencing internally and we're influencing externally. So internally, we need to walk the talk, right? So we can't tell our members, you need to be working on diversity and inclusion, and we didn't have our own program. So internally, we need to focus on ourselves, figure out, we look diverse. If you look at our MBA staffing, we look fairly diverse, but like most organizations, the higher you go, the less diverse we look. And so we need to focus on that for ourselves and really pay attention to our practices around interviewing, our practices around hiring and promotions and that kind of thing. And that's where we are today. We're looking very closely at that. In addition to responding as an organization to what in America we're dealing with around the issues of racial unrest. And so responding as an organization to how employees are feeling and how people are reacting to that. And so that's been a really strong focus of ours. But in addition to that, we've got a strong need to influence our industry. Our industry for a long time has looked the same. And so we're working hard with our members to identify, they're at different states. So you go to some large banks where they've had a lot more pressure and they have a lot more regulation, and they look a little bit more diverse than some of our smaller organizations, our independent mortgage bankers who haven't had any particular requirement to diversify, but obviously as they look at the world and the population and the way the world is changing, their customer base is certainly diversifying, and they need to be able to react to that customer base. And so one of the things that we have started to do is really talk to them about the ways that people receive information. For example, if you're selling a home to a different populations, they don't all their buying habits aren't the same. The way they receive information is the same. The way you market to them isn't the same. So we've been doing a lot of education around that. In our commercial multifamily space, again, that's, office buildings, they look the same. And that's an inclusion issue where you have people say, well, I came to work there, but I didn't feel included. So our piece is really a lot of education, right? We have no power to force our members to be diverse, right? That's not where we're going to gain it, but we can help them with talking about things like pipeline. Where do you get diverse talent from? Because everyone says, well, I'd like to be diverse, but I can't find the talent. And we tell them, There's no bucket that you're going to go to and find this diverse talent pool where you can pluck somebody out. This is as we say, not just diversity and inclusion, but it's deliberate and intentional. You have to be deliberate and intentional about how you approach diversity and inclusion. It can't just be something you're going to try to do. It's got to be something that you're focused on doing. And so our whole game really is influence at the MBA, because we've got to influence our members in order to change our industry.
It's so funny that you said that, because I remember a story with a similar organization and network which had a lot of members, and we had to drive change. And they said, Amit, how do we actually get people engaging with us? And Mohammed Patel, he's one of the delegates online right now. And we've had a conversation with the organization that he works for. And some of it is quite simple, because the whiteboard, and mainly male board, said to me, Amit, how do we engage, Black and Asian groups with the organization? And it was so interesting. And I said to them, have you gone past some of the centers, the African Caribbean centers, en route to work? And they say, yes, we see them. And I say, great. So why don't you get into my car? And I physically drove them down to a center without an appointment, just to say, can we learn from you? Can we connect with you? So some of it is about some of the answers around the pipeline and engaging people in a way which is inclusive isn't rocket science often. So at one level, it's very difficult, but some of it is just about that fear of engaging. And that board, it's not that they were probably being discriminatory. They were probably felt that they didn't have the skills to engage with diverse groups of people in that way. So just bringing back in the whole idea about coalition pipeline, often it's about connecting with diverse groups and being very brave about how we do that. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Okay, my next question then is, what challenges have you come across when driving a D&I agenda? So I'm going to go back to Kim Ann.
So a number of challenges that you face. I'd say one is favoring form over substance. I think that it's very easy for an organization to say, oh, like, we did a training event, we did this, like, we're done.
Right.
And you are never done with this, and you will never be done with inclusion and diversity. Absolutely. Right? But they do like a training program. They're like, oh, we're going to do a mentorship. We're like, we've done it. The second thing I would be is under indexing on broader diversity initiatives. So you're in doing so, you create like an us versus them culture. And let me explain that more thoroughly. I think that we need to remember that diversity and equity and inclusion is not just a black and white issue. Right. I think we've seen that, like, recently, and rightfully so, a lot of corporations, like, focusing in on the Black Lives Matters groups or those inequities, but we've had a whole host of them, and we continue to have a whole host of them, right? And I feel like as part of this initiative, one of the responsibilities that I'm trying to do with IT is saying, when we recognize the uniqueness and the diversity on everybody's, I think that people will be more naturally inclined to support others and create that sense of allyship that's enduring, that leads to meaningful inclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a word which I'm not sure whether it's used in the States or in India, but in England, we are talking a lot about intersectionality. I think it's a term which is used in these states. So intersectionality is a challenging issue, because although we have different strands of diversity, whether we talk about ethnicity and gender and sexual orientation, there's also a recognition that all of those identities can be overlapping. And that's where it starts to get challenging as well. So we have to be careful that we don't just box a diversity agenda into, men and women and black and white, but actually there are so many different things at play. Can you imagine? I walked into an organization where I'd been appointed as the head of diversity, and what had happened was they were so enthusiastic about taking me out for dinner, and they'd booked this wonderful restaurant. And I said, okay, well, where are we going? So en route, they were taking me to a restaurant which was mainly based on meat. And I'm a vegan, and I'm also a vegetarian, and I'm also a Hindu by faith, and all of these things were interplaying. And I'm saying, we're going to have to change direction here very quickly. Now, I had the privilege of being the head of diversity for the organization, so they all felt a bit embarrassed, and I managed that, embarrassment. And we found a different restaurant. Luckily, I have a good network of places I know that I can go to. But people almost with their good intentions actually do things which are interculturally incompetent unconsciously, and we had a conversation about unconscious bias. So, and you're absolutely right. Just ticking the box approach of how we're going to manage diversity is do a training course, and we've done our diversity thing, isn't going to work. So we are going to be in work for a long time, I hope. It's never going to go away. Elizabeth, tell me about your challenges.
You know, mine are pretty similar to Kim Ann, but they are, we call it slightly different, right? So I think the main challenge that we've really come across is balancing this head and heart of the diversity and inclusion efforts.
Right.
And what I mean by that is like the head part is like the analytics, the data, the numbers, the technology, the rationale on the business sense of why to do it. Ticking off that box that yes, we've done the bias training. Yes, we are training our managers on how to have difficult conversations. Those are the very tangible head items.
Right.
And they're easier to do than driving the heart piece of DNA. I think the heart piece is where the passion is, where the people really start to get groundswell and you start to drive, you know, community groups. And those are more items like leadership listening tours after social injustices happen, or creating safe haven and forums of which I like, you know, what you were showing prior to us getting on, where people could write their ideas down and have that safe forum to talk about it.
Right.
And then you can have a little bit of anonymity to, you know, reinforce which ones really matter to you. And I think the heart part is the part that I continually have to advocate really heavily for,
Yeah.
versus the head part. Everyone's like, yep, we got to do that. That's sure, you know, get those numbers out there, get those numbers up, right? Put our diversity pipeline in there. But driving the heart and making sure that you stay focused on the heart, I think has been where we find it to be challenging, but also the most rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think linking in that social justice aspect to it. So one of the things that I've done in an organization is where I ask the leaders as part of my audit is, you know, how much training have you been involved with diversity? What engagement have you had? And they said, well, we have the policy and we had our training, as Kim had said, and that's it. So what we started to do was to say, okay, let's get stories of diverse individuals from within the organization and externally to talk about a social justice issue. But you're going to be the host, you're going to be the leader. So instead of it just being like a diversity training course, they had to educate themselves about that issue and also be seen to be a leader for that individual and that cause to the whole organization. So there are kind of influencing techniques that I've learned over the years of my practice around this, which actually hopefully gets people more from the heart. And it is a heart agenda as much as it is a head agenda. Thank you very much for that. Lisa.
I think I would say that one of the biggest challenges has been around the issue of, you know, as we all know, you have to have leadership buy-in, right? And it can't be just lip service. And I think in our industry in particular, and even within the MBA, it's been making sure it's not just lip service. We have to be committed to this. We have to be all in. And then not just the CEO, because the CEO can give you that. And then if the staff that's just, you know, the senior staff, if everybody on the senior staff isn't on board, staff feel it. And so, you know, we've done some things. And when we first started our diversity program, one of the criticisms of our staff is, you know, we have a team of maybe 11 senior managers, senior leaders, and only 3 of them show up for any of the activities we have. We have a lunch and learn discussion, only 3 are showing up. Now we're to a place we've got a CEO who's come in and he's, you know, 100% bias. Now, if you're not there, it's because you're not in the office, you're out of town, some reason why you're not there, because it became you ought to be there unless you have a reason why you're not there. And I think that that's critically important, and it changes the whole dynamic for the staff internally. And then externally getting, you know, we'll meet with members and you'll have, you know, a certain level of people who are charged and ready to go in, but they're having trouble getting their senior leadership to buy into what they're doing and the importance of it and how they can make change. And so I think that has been one of the largest challenges in our industry, is getting senior leaders, CEOs, not just bought in from as they said, it looks good on paper, we check the box, I have a diversity program, but really bought into the importance and the value of diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the questions that had come up was, how do you actually get your senior management teams and your CEO and their team on board in a way which is meaningful? one of the approaches that we took to learning and training was action learning sets, where they within their peer groups actually had an opportunity then to really talk about why they struggle with the diversity agenda in a very safe space, and then actually try and do something about it and bring that back to their peer group. So it wasn't just about the diversity training course for a day, half a day, an hour. This was about them actually having some real challenges which were manageable within their busy schedule. So for me, as much as it's about giving knowledge, it's about experiencing diversity and what it actually means for leaders in their group, because we do want them on board, and actually recognizing that those leaders are not separate to being different and diverse. Once I start to actually have conversations with them, tell me about your difference and your diversity, what can happen is majority groups can actually fall into this whole sense of we are normal and it's the minorities and the others who are different. But actually, we are all different, and getting that message across to people is really interesting, to saying this agenda benefits you directly, because guess what? You all have an age. Right. We all have an age diversity. So that's one element of intersectionality, age, sex, etc., which we have. And how can we harness the inherent diversity that people have to actually support them to get on board? So I totally appreciate it is challenging. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so what are your 3 tips for achieving D&I change in an organization? And I'm going to go to Elizabeth first, just because I like shaking it up. Elizabeth.
Yeah, so, I think a lot of it has been already discussed in this call, but kind of my 3 general tips are really, you need to focus on a sense of belonging for employees, whether you call it fearless authenticity, like Clorox says, or something else, but you need to make sure people can connect to the organization and each other. I think that is super important. Also, what we were just talking about, engaging leadership, and more importantly, empathetic leadership. One of the most powerful things we saw was when leaders in the D&I, and they didn't have to be, just the C-suite people, but leaders can be anyone in the organization who has passion in this. And when they share their personal story and they become vulnerable and open, that leaves the door open for others to do it and for others to come in. So very much engaging leadership, I think, is super important. And the third one is don't go it alone. D&I is hard. I can say this like 500 times, but it's hard work and it's hard to keep the momentum going. And there are ups and downs in everyone's journey. And so when you have people around you internally and externally to support you or to give you ideas or to brainstorm off of, or like, how do I move this piece forward? What can I do here? Who are the right connections? Are the experts in this? Create a group of people that you can really do it together with. So those would be my 3 points.
Absolutely, low-hanging fruit, and you got away with that one because you went first, and the others can't say that everything that you have said, right? So you're going to have to work really hard. Lisa, I'm going to go over to you.
Right, that just made it hard because she stole at least one of mine, but I'll come up with some others. The first one I would say is, as I said, be deliberate and intentional. I think that's key. It can't be just a part of something. It has to be very deliberate. It has to be very intentional. The second thing is actually something you said, sharing experiences. And so that was the way that we engaged our senior leadership. And it happened around the whole racial inequity thing, but people started sharing experiences, and it helped people identify with, I never knew you went through that. I never knew that was an issue for you. It also happened when we did a session within the MBA called Embracing the LGBTQ plus community. And we had 2 people tell this story. And when they walked away, people were just like, I never knew that was an issue. I never knew you went through that. And so helping people identify with the experience, I think, is one way to really expand this D&I effort. And the third thing I would say is what a consultant told us was start somewhere. So there are lots of organizations like, where do I start? And she said, just start somewhere. Like, pick something and start. So often we need a 5-step plan. And, I said, well, do we do this first, do that? She said, just do something first. And she said, and once you start doing something, you'll then be able to figure it out. And so we started with an unconscious bias training. And then I said, so we have this. She's like, it's a great start. Now you've started, you can move from here. So the third thing I would say is just, if anyone's at a place we haven't just figured out where to start, find something that you like, something that may work in your organization, and start somewhere.
Absolutely. And it can start on any of those trends, as you have said, is that just engage people who are experts of experience or knowledge from a different diversity strand and engage them and see where that conversation takes you. And it's so interesting because some of the stories would actually come from within the organization as well, but people hide their identities. They don't bring them full selves to work, but creating a safe space to say to people, having that coalition of people saying, you know what, we're going to share our stories. And you're absolutely right that there is so much data out there, and we don't have enough stories. And I always say that Excel, although as valuable as it is a vortex for creativity. And it's not difficult to create stories as much as it is stats. Yeah, and we can do that. Thank you very much for that, Kim-Ann.
This is tough to go third on this, but I'm going to take it a shot. And some of them is going to be overlapping, but I'm still going to go for it. So I'd say 3 things, and it's make it personal, make it persistent, and it's got to be top down, bottom up. And so let me crack that open. So the make it personal is, Lisa and Elizabeth, those talk about like the short stories and trying to figure out like how you make that personal connection. And I use it and it doesn't have to be just hearing someone's stories, but sometimes it's trying to find that relatable moment. And I use this example when I talk about it. I went to Brussels a few years ago, and I had a colleague who was in a wheelchair. And I don't know if you've ever been to Brussels, but I had this profoundly experience where I said, this is living in a world without the American with Disabilities Act, because it was literally impossible for her to go anywhere. Everybody had stairs. There was no handicapped accessible bathrooms. And so I watched her for a week struggle with that. And that opened up my eyes. So I heard or saw her story. And then this is going to be a stupid example, but pretty recently I went to Lowe's and I was pushing this gigantic cart down this aisle. And there were all these obstacles in the way. And it was by the time I was at the end of that, I was like, God, I can't imagine if this was my everyday, because it was just irate. And it was just one of those things that felt so insensitive. And it dawned on me, I can't even imagine what the differently able go through every single day. Absolutely. So I was able to take an event that happened in my own life that was unrelated and be able to find that commonality that had a whole new experience with it. So we tried very hard at Vanguard to create relatable movements and also create environments. We had for National Coming Out Week, we were talking about, and we have Transgender Week coming up in November. And it was imagine if tomorrow we said that even though you identify as a woman, I'm going to say the world's going to dress you as a man, and you have to be a man. You have to dress like this. It's just what's going to happen. And then also imagine if tomorrow I said you couldn't marry your husband or wife or girlfriend or boyfriend. You could not be them anymore. And that was just the way it is. And if you don't agree to any of those, you could lose your job. And that's a profoundly impactful thing when people start to find those relatable moments.
Yeah.
Persistent, again, that's just that every day. For us, what we do is we take a diversity calendar, which is really profound if nobody has ever done it. And you make sure that listen, it's not just black and white and women and men and LGBTQ+, it's everything. There's National Autism Week, there's the high holidays for the Jewish community. Are we making sure that we're being inclusive and persistent in it? And then lastly, I feel like a lot of organizations rely on senior leadership to drive down these initiatives and ignore the voices of the people on the ground that experience this every day. And especially the younger groups that have that even augmented feeling of powerlessness because they don't have the position. I think Amit, you said earlier that it's nice to be the chief of diversity and call it out there. But how many people wouldn't have the ability to say, you're taking me to a restaurant that's insensitive to who I am? Right? And they grin and bear it and try to find something on the menu.
Yeah, exactly.
So we really need to be able to listen to that community and have them also drive that agenda.
And absolutely right. I mean, that I have been to Brussels and I know about some of the accessibility issues around that. But what I had recognized, and I thought I have to practice what I preach. So one of the things that I started in the UK was a disability organization called Ability Action. And it was really interesting, the amount of things that I learned from people as an able-bodied person with people of diverse abilities and recognizing that I also have diverse abilities and they are not disabled was really interesting. And the personal challenge that it actually brought to me was, amazing in terms of the insights that I got about myself and how it's so easy for me to actually live with the privilege and the able-bodiedness. And I have to experience that and feel that difficulty and that challenge so I can teach it to organizations and groups that I'm working with. So relatability is really important. The other thing that I also did, just from a cross-cultural perspective, because history has probably shown us that when people spoke about diversity, they used to put samosas out on tables, so they got an experience of Indian culture, and then they used to have some steel bands, so they got a feeling of African culture, and it was really interesting. So what I started to do was actually say to white English people, let's learn about your culture. So why do you walk dogs in the morning, and why do you always speak about the weather, and what is all of this please and thank you every 2 seconds and sorry stuff? And that was really interesting, because what that did was actually put them in the view of, you are cultural too, and they thought, oh, we never actually saw ourselves as a cultural group. I said, well, you definitely are, eating with your forks and knives. What's that about, right? So it's really interesting when you flip things on its head, so you give people an experience of their own difference. So thank you very much for that. Okay, now I appreciate that this may not be something that I certainly am not a complete expert on this, but if you've got some thoughts, it would be really welcome. And that's about the role of technology and innovation. Being part of this program right now has been really powerful, because we've seen the level of participation that people have put on the platform. We see that it can be a safe space. People can put their thoughts and comments based on their thinking around diversity, or even their experience as an organization, without being identified. That can be used for real intelligence and data to drive a diversity program. So this was one of the reasons why we put on this event with Innovation Minds, to say, look, how can we actually bring the two agendas together? And essentially, we have to be innovative with diversity, and diversity has to innovate itself for it to actually change. So what are your thoughts about that? And again, I'm not looking for any key kind of solutions from you, but do you think that technology and innovation has a real role with diversity and inclusion? So I'll go to Lisa.
Yeah, I think that, broadly speaking, I think that one of the benefits of technology is you can reach more people. You can you have a further reach with technology. And I think technology can be used to do a couple of things. One, to create what doesn't currently exist. So if you're in an organization, or if you have an organization where you have certain groups of people who need to connect to other people, you may not have more than 2 Latinos or Hispanics in your current company, if you have a small company, but you can connect them using technology. You can connect to different groups in different companies. As Elizabeth said, don't go it alone. Technology allows you to not go it alone. You can connect to other people's ERG groups. You could connect to other people's conferences. And so I think that one of the things technology does allow us to do is do the outreach. And the second thing is in terms of building pipeline. I think that technology will allow us to create pipelines in places that we wouldn't normally go to do recruiting. And that's where I think that we can really use it as a powerful tool to recruit students into our industries, to recruit people, who may or may not show up for a particular event that we're having, but they may get online if we have a virtual career fair. And so I think that's where we can, and we've started to tap into that now, where we're doing that. We were going to have in-person career fairs, but obviously we're not able to do that. And so we have one planned for January, virtual career fairs, where companies, have booths. And I think that's one of the more powerful ways to use the technology, is to figure out how to use it to connect ourselves to people of all differences.
Great, thank you so much for that. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'm gonna reiterate what Lisa's saying. Technology is an enabler, right? And it can enable every aspect of your IND process, your diversity inclusion process, whether it's recruiting, whether it's connecting people, whether it's making sure that you have a forum to go talk to, join a different Facebook group that has different members in it to learn. It can create so much information for you to go move the needle forward and to change how your organization works. I also think that innovation is important in every aspect of it, right? we're not doing things the same today as we were 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. With the current pandemic situation, with everything that it's driving, right? It's moving technology and it's adapting to it much, much faster. The innovation part of it is creating these, safe space, co-creating with different majority and minority groups, being able to then vote and socialize which ones are really important to you. That's all giving power to voices that may not have the courage to stand up in other forums. So I do think that technology has a place and can really start to impact and move D&I strategies much faster forward.
Great. Kim, I'm going to be very English and say sorry because you have gone last on this. And if there's anything that you can add to Lisa and Elizabeth, that would be great.
Yeah, again, it's really difficult. I'd say I'm in IT, so I think that technology solves most problems. So I am biased in that way. I'll just really quickly say that at Vanguard, we use technology for diversity in 3 different ways. And one is the talent, the access to talent. Again, it allows you to like break geographic borders, right? I'm gonna not lie to you, like our central operations are in Malvern, Pennsylvania. If you've been to Malvern, Pennsylvania, it's an overwhelmingly white place. And so we don't actually have a hard time bringing talent in there unless you want to have a long commute. So what we've been doing is deploying technology to see, how can we like broaden that workforce? Can we have people that are working for more diverse communities and allow them to stay there and to rely on that community? The second is training. And that's not only in the conventional sense of doing diversity and inclusion training, but also we've been partnering with some really great groups here, like Step It Up America, where you can go out and actually find the communities that are underrepresented in your organization and target them, upskill them, and give them a chance. For example, where you're doing it with women who have taken time off for children or whatever the case may be, allowing them to re-enter the workforce. And then lastly, just creating that sense of community and connectivity, especially in these distant times.
Fantastic. Absolutely.
So, Amit, it's Debbie chiming in with the music. That is my voice, unfortunately, which isn't really anything close to music. But my request is that we try to wrap up. I know you've gone through all the questions, because what I would like to do is give the attendees who are on the line with us an opportunity to ask any questions that they may have. And both for the panelists as well as the session itself. So that was just a kind of a warning bell, Amit.
Yeah, wonderful. Have we got anybody? How are we going to do that? Are we going to unmute somebody who's got a question, or are you going to go to the...
I will have them, if you wouldn't mind, just as they have been doing, put their question into the chat pane, because we still have, upwards of 50 people on the line, so that'll get a little bit difficult to have unmutes. So please do, if you have any. And thank you so much for all the kind words we've been getting. Some folks have had to drop off, but they've had a lot of very positive feedback that I can't wait to share with our panelists and our moderators. But in the meantime, if there is a question, why don't we put it into the chat window and we'll go from there. Does that work for you all? And I'm sorry I didn't prepare our panelists for the fact that there might be questions, so you are welcome to defer. Or you can, certainly answer. I see one question's come in. We're getting into politics. That may be dangerous. So
great question that you have to address. It's a great.
Yeah, of course you have to address it.
I don't know about politics, but let's see what we've got here. With U.S. election cycle in the forefront, do organizations embrace diverse political identities as well? Or should they be politically right to stay away from it? Well, that's a hot question.
Well, I can speak for our organization. We have to work hard to be bipartisan because we actually represent a wide industry. So because of who we are, we actually have lobbyists for both Democrats and Republicans on the Hill. So as a general rule, if anything's allowed from one side, it's allowed from the other side. But in terms of even internally, we're not squashing people's particular political affiliation, but the organization, there is a culture of, we understand that we have to be a bipartisan organization, and therefore we don't lean toward one side or the other side, and so employees generally respect that, and as a result, maybe it's an unspoken, we may have political conversations, but with respect to the direction that we go, we have to be very particular about what we express and how we express it.
Great, thank you. Yes, that was a very thoughtful and I think very, we always think when we get into politics that it's going to immediately go to a strange place, but you've just proven, Lisa, that it doesn't have to.
No.
I'd love to chime in on this one as well, because I think it's really interesting. I feel like for the first time in history, well, not history, but so overtly, that there are so many strong social issues that are dividing the parties, right? And so, while I agree that the organization, and I think Vanguard plays pretty neutral in terms of the politics side of things, I'm very proud to say that we are very vocal on the social issue. For example, we had Pride Month. Like, we proudly flew the gay flag, LGBTQ plus rainbow flag over all Vanguard offices. We were unequivocally clear that the organization supports that. When we talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, like, we unequivocally support the Black Lives Matter movement. We'll do it on our social media pages. We'll see it from as Ty as our CEO, that will go out and say there that we support our Black community without reservation. And so I think in many ways, that's a way to approach it without having to get into the separate things of Republican versus Democrat.
Yeah, and I think, for the Clorox company, or in the Bay Area, so we definitely, California and the Bay Area tends to have a specific leaning, right? And so we try to create safe space so people can have open but respectful conversations if they so choose. What the Clorox company does is that on election day is actually a quiet day. So while not everyone gets off of work, it is that you do not send meetings, that you do not send emails, but you really take that time to make sure that you have a chance to vote and be heard, and take the time to reflect. And I think that was a really important decision that Clorox made this year, because of how tense we would say that the environment is currently in the state.
Yes, and you know what? That's a really terrific segue, Elizabeth, because we only have time for just a couple more questions, and then we're going to wrap up because we are closely coming in on our top of the hour when the seminar ends. But your segue is perfect into a question that we have. Would you say most firms are approaching D&I as reactionary to times now rather than proactively, or vice versa?
I'd love to chime in on that one as well. And I think that, yes, everybody is reactively getting into it. Let's be real. Not to say that we didn't have proactive efforts before, but let's call a spade a spade. Everybody is jumping on the corporate social responsibility bandwagon right now, which is D&I. And so I have a problem with that, because for me, I don't know how we're doing until we see this over some period of significant time in a real the commitment to it that we can see. Right now, diversity and equity are on sale. And I hate to say that, but it's the price of entry hasn't changed. What we've done is put items on sale. And so I feel like for a diverse community, I'm shop your hearts out. You should get it, because we don't know if that sale is going to end. But until we see that systemic commitment and long-term, for sure, everyone's acting reactively.
And the proof of that is in the United States. If you look at the increase in the number of diversity and inclusion jobs that were posted this summer, that is proof right there that everyone's reactionary. All of a sudden, in the US, lots of organizations have dedicated D&I people, or have posted jobs for dedicated D&I people. And these are same organizations that may or may not have had a D&I program to begin with, but now it's to your point, it's the thing to do, right? In order to hang your banner, you have to say that you've got a D&I person, and that just shows you how reactionary. Now, great, come on aboard that we're reacting to it, but I hope that 2-3 years from now, people are still in the same space, and it wasn't a reaction to an event or a reaction to a series of events, but it's actually a commitment going forward. It's actually a movement and not a moment. And so I think that that's going to be the telling sign as to whether this reactionary approach was just that reactionary, or whether it just kickstarted people to be where they should be anyway.
Exactly.
Right. Brilliant.
Right. Yes. That was a great comment. Okay, unfortunately, I have to say we are out of time for any more questions. Any questions that we've missed, we'll be happy to follow up on later if you'd like for us to do so. We always love to reach out and come up with additional answers and dialogue. We love to have the dialogue whenever we can. So let me thank our panelists. And Amit, I was going to also send it back to you for any closing comments. And then we're off to enjoy the rest of our days. And I know that our participants from India are just approaching the midnight hour here. So it's getting very challenging. And maybe, in fact, those are the individuals we might have lost.
Just to actually say that, I'm so glad we've got a recording of this session, because the comments that have been made by each of our panelists, and indeed questions that have been are so insightful, and I think we should capture that by some way and share that with other people, because I don't want to lose that intellectual capital. Lisa, I am going to take away, it's not a moment, it's a movement. I think that's absolutely brilliant in terms of, how to actually vocalize some of the commitments to diversity, which is often about virtuous signaling. So right now, there seems to be a lot of people doing virtue signaling. So commitments are being made, roles are being created, but is it really going to be impactful? So that's something to look out for. So thank you very much, all of you, for your contributions, and indeed all of the participants that have joined our session. I think that leads us on to, Debbie, is that right? A final... Yes.
We have just, you had shared with me a slide, and then I have the final connect information about our websites if anybody wants to try and connect with us or have dialogue. Of course, our LinkedIn pages are always free-flowing for engagement and dialogue. We love it. We love the conversations, and I know I speak for myself. I love having new connections that I can have meetings of the minds with. But Amit, are you, did you want me to bring up the additional
if we can just very briefly, just to kind of give people again an idea of some of the things that diversity actually means practically in organizations.
Okay,
so
let me make that
just
visible
as
here.
a quick reminder to ourselves, Akshat, thank you for creating this very simple slide. Let's not forget our auditing. Let's think about how diversity is not a bolt-on and actually links to strategic planning. We've already talked about training, but don't make training the complete output of your diversity work, and make sure that it's really impactful training. Ensure that the engagement is right. Don't develop diversity strategies in isolation with a few people. Use innovation. You've had an experience of that. And don't forget the leadership commitment. It's really important that leaders are on board from top down. And indeed, leadership doesn't necessarily mean a hierarchy in organization of people at the top. At any part of an organization, people can be trained how to be a leader and influence real positive change. So think about some of these things within your work. That's certainly something that we have all been involved with. It's something that I have supported many organizations increase and do. And we look forward to continuing our conversations on all of these areas with you. They say I think it's an African saying which says it takes a village to educate a child, and we've really been part of a global village here. Let's kind of continue with a childlike mind of openness to actually start to think about how we can connect better on this agenda. So thank you all very much. Debbie.
Thank you. Yes, I have no additional words that wouldn't just be as well as what you just said, Amit, other than thank you so much to our panelists for your time. Thank you to our participants. We will post the recording in case you'd like to watch it again. Do some additional follow-up. Feel free to reach out to us. We love to get into the dialogue, as I said, and reach out anytime. And we will, like I said, share the recording and post it in our social media, as well as through email links if you registered with us for this session. Hope you all have a wonderful evening, afternoon, as well as morning, if it's still morning. And you take care and stay safe.
Thank you all very much.
Bye.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.